NASA. Their mission is to explore the boundless stars and seek out new frontiers for humanity, uncovering the greatest mysteries of all, what lies beyond our stars. But is it possible they've already made contact and they don't want us to know, to avoid panic or to avoid the truth? Good evening, ghouls and goblins. I'm Taylor, your casual crypt keeper, and this is the top 5 dark things NASA covered up. Let's dive right on in. Number 5, Yang Liwei. In space, no one can hear you scream. They also can't hear you laugh, sing, or really just about do anything. It's markedly quiet up in space, which would make encountering a sound that you don't recognize while floating through the cosmos quite the stressful encounter, wouldn't you agree? In 2003, Yang Liwei became the first taikonaut to be sent into space by the CNSA, that's the Chinese National Space Administration, making headlines and history. Now, a few years ago, Liwei was giving an interview talking about his experiences, and he let slip a bizarre encounter that happened to him while he was out there in space. He said he recalled hearing the sound of someone knocking the hull of the spaceship as if someone was hammering at an iron bucket. He said, it didn't come from inside the spaceship, but it didn't come from outside either. That doesn't make me feel good. Naturally, Liwei was a little more than concerned at what he was experiencing, and he peered out into the porthole in hope of seeing something, maybe like we were low on fuel, and the spacecraft was just tumbling through space. Ed was asleep. We were taking turns sleeping in shifts. Anyway, Ed was asleep, and I was doing something in the craft. When I looked outside, I just glanced up, and there was something out there. It had a geometrical shape, similar to a beer can or a pop can, and with a little thing, like maybe a pencil or something sticking out of it. That size, dimensionally, it was all white. Now naturally, people ran with this and published stories about Mcoivitt having seen a UFO and this being proof of an alien craft or a drone up in space. I mean, an astronaut saying outright, I think I saw a UFO up there, that's a pretty big deal. That's way more exciting than anything they were doing in the Gemini mission. Mcoivitt, however, changed his own tune about it and claims that when he returned home and he studied photographs from the craft, trying to understand what it was that he saw, he had a very boring revelation. Mcoivitt claims now that what he had seen was actually just a reflection of bolts from the hull in the window. The windows in the Gemini 4 craft were layered with 5 panes of glass, so that if one pane somehow cracked, there's still a good amount of pressure integrity. This thinking being that one of these panes did crack, and the sun shined on them just at the right angle, and the strange white object Mcoivitt saw was nothing more than a reflection being multiplied and reflected off multiple window panes. Mcoivitt clarified in the same interview, saying, I'm quite sure that's what this thing was. Now, of course, it's also possible that he really did see a UFO and NASA got to him and pressed down on him just a little bit to get him to stop talking about it and publicly deny it. I mean, it's possible. I've definitely speculated way more wild, outrageous things than that on this channel. Number 3, Leroy Chiao. Leroy Chiao is an American astronaut and one of considerable renown. Chiao's flown 3 missions and he served as the commander on Expedition X, a 6.5-month-long voyage living on the International Space Station, Expedition X. That does kind of sound more like a raging house party than a NASA mission, but to each their own. In 2005, Chiao and another astronaut were outside installing navigation antennas on board the ISS, some 230 miles above the Earth, floating at 17,000 miles per hour, and Chiao saw something bizarre in the sky that he couldn't understand. Why don't we take a listen? I saw some lights that seemed to be in a line, and it was almost like an upside down check mark, kind of like an upside down Nike swoosh. And I saw them fly by, and I thought it was awfully strange. Chiao would tell the Huffington Post this. The cosmonaut with him didn't see the lights in time, facing the other way entirely. Imagine that, missing the aliens because you were looking the wrong way. Embarrassing. Some have speculated that the lights could have been the lights from a squid fishing boat from Earth, which use these incredibly bright lights when fishing at night for squid, and these have been reported erroneously as UFO sightings or bizarre phenomena in space all the time with these strange green lights. It pops up. There was something that happened similarly on the ISS on a live feed they were doing where these lights went by and people thought they were an alien craft, but really just a squid boat. So it's not entirely unreasonable to think this. Now, Chiao himself is skeptical of whether or not what he saw is alien in origin. Although, and I think this is important, he's open to the idea of it. He's open to this discussion. Listen to what he said. He said, "I'm skeptical of claims that we've been visited by aliens from another planet or another dimension, but I don't rule it out 100%. I have an open mind, and I do believe there's other life in the universe. But if there is life out there that's so much more advanced than we are, and they either know how to travel great distances in short amounts of time, or they're able to come from parallel universes into ours, well, why don't they just come and show themselves?" Well, maybe they did, Leroy. Maybe that was them extending an olive branch and trying to show themselves and they were just being a little bit shy, and you're just being skeptical. Yeah, well, maybe we just have to make them feel really welcome. Arms open, say, "Come on in, guys. We're ready for you." Number 2, Story Musgrave. Story Musgrave. That's his real name. Story Musgrave. He's an interesting critter, bro. He was an astronaut. He's flown on 5 different space shuttles. He's got 6 different academic degrees, collecting them like they were the Infinity Stones. He's a public speaker, and now he's an Imagineer at Disney. Isn't that something? Making animatronics for Avatar World. He's got quite the career path. And he may also be the human that aliens have chosen to represent themselves to as their envoy. I get it though, look at the guy. He kind of looks like an alien, which might be why. Though he does look wise. If I was an alien, I'd contact him, definitely. He's academic, he's driven, he worked for the most powerful organization on Earth, and he worked at NASA. Story claims that on 2 different missions, he encountered a being looking like a giant snake that was sentient and recognized him. Take a listen to this. "On 2 of my missions, and I still don't have an answer, I've seen a snake out there, 6, 7, 8 feet long. It's got waves in it and it follows you for a rather long period of time. The more you fly in space, the more you see an incredible amount of things out there, and that sort of brings to you really a certain je ne sais quoi that other living creatures are out there. Some incredibly primitive, some just proteins coming together, and some just single-cell organisms." Well, single-cell organisms aside, what was that cell organism? Was it a floating hose that had come off the ship? Musgrave claiming that he'd seen the entity twice certainly raises an eyebrow, unless these ships are prone to breaking in the exact same hose. Well, he never said outright if he thought it was an alien or not. He did offer that he does believe there's intelligent life out there just waiting. Take a listen. "Living creatures far more developed as civilizations. That's why I make an effort to communicate. And I might be considered eccentric because I do, but I know the probabilities are close to 0. But I do tell them to come down and get at me. And get at him you should, aliens. Story Musgrave is out there waiting for you. He's got stories to tell you, and you can tell him some stories." Number 1, Gordon Cooper. Major Gordon Cooper is a flying ace in his own right before conquering the stars. He was the first man in space to ever spend a full 24 hours by himself, which was probably just so lovely. Imagine all that me time. And he was the last American to ever spend a solo orbit around the planet. A real go-getter, real loner cowboy type. He was also reached out by aliens more than once in his life. Seems like aliens really pick and choose their favorites. When he was still a flying ace in 1951, he says over a test flight in West Germany, he encountered 3 flying metallic saucers following his plane. Now, he reported this bizarre incident to his superiors, but as far as we know, it was never followed up or investigated further. This was only a few years after Roswell and Kenneth Arnold, the civilian pilot, would both make headlines as stories of flying saucers, so maybe the government was just tired of hearing about flying saucers for a bit and was like, yes, Cooper, yes, you totally saw some flying saucers. This wouldn't be the last close encounter of the third kind for Major Cooper, however. In 1963, on the Project 9 Mercury mission, Gordon was orbiting the Earth and returning home when he noticed a glowing green orb following behind him, which he described as looking ethereal. Now, whatever this ethereal glowing green orb was tracked on radar stations all the way down home down under in Australia, so it was a physical, tangible object, not some trick of the light, no squid boat here. Now, all of this would be a pretty strange set of coincidences as is, but when Gordon touched down back to Earth, he was ready for a press conference to entertain journalists' questions. Only NBC had told their reporters they were forbidden from asking any questions about what Gordon had seen, whether or not he believed in UFOs, or any questions about flying saucers or that sort of ilk. Isn't that curious? Was NASA covering something up? Could that green orb have been some hyper-advanced space-age technology? An envoy from a more advanced civilization? How many things can I speculate are aliens? All of them. Cooper has said before in the USA, every day our radar instruments capture objects of form and composition unknown to us. And there are thousands of witness reports and a quantity of documents to prove this, but no one wants to make them public. Why? Because authorities are afraid that people may think up God knows what kind of horrible invaders. We have to avoid panic. Now, maybe I'm reading too much into this little quote here from Major Gordon Cooper, but it sounds like he knows something about NASA higher-ups that they press down on stories involving things from beyond because they think we can't handle it, or that we need to avoid panic, or because they're worried that people like me are going to say that they're aliens. Well, that's all for this video, my ghouls and goblins. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one of these, and keep on creeping on.